These super cute plush no-sew birds work up so fast in plush, blanket, chenille, and velvet yarns. But I've crocheted a bunch of these little fellas in wool, acrylic, and novelty yarns to see how they would compare. I wanted to see if I could use up yarn I already own and how the different yarns crocheted up. If you are wondering how this one pattern crochets up in many different kinds of yarn, then this is the video for you. Welcome to Windy Hill Crochet. I'm Chelsea. Today we are going to crochet up a plushy bird. As we walk through the process, I'm going to share tips that I've learned from making so many of these birds. I am sure this little stash buster is going to be a hit with my friends, family, and customers. Now I want to introduce you to my mom, Sherry. We have been working really hard on crocheting up lots of items for our markets in 2024.
I was watching tons of YouTube videos looking to find the perfect items that we could crochet for our markets in 2024. And I came across this adorable, no-sew, cute little bird pattern called Little Fluckers. It's designed by Knots by Jack, and we'll leave the link in the description box below so you can go check out this adorable pattern. I found it was easy to make, but there were a couple of tricky things to learn, and the great thing about this designer is they've provided some video tutorials which totally made it so much easier to learn to crochet even the very first bird. But once you've made a couple of them, it's just the pattern's very simple and you'll enjoy making these very much.
As I've made the pattern too, I found it to be really easy and repetitive, and it just becomes a hypnotic process.
And it's so much fun to think of different ways that you can create these birds. So in the pattern, the designer actually made, I think, about 10 different kinds of birds, and they each one are like a real living bird, like a cardinal or a mallard duck. But we're having so much fun creating other kinds of birds, like a little sparrow or just a cute woolly bird.
Yeah, I saw this yarn in my stash and I said, well, this is going to be a fancy flocker.
The items that you're going to need to crochet these birds include a crochet hook, the yarn of your choice, a sewing needle, safety eyes, and a stitch marker, and stuffing.
You don't want a floppy bird. The designer of this pattern has come up with a super clever way of starting the top of the bird. I was really surprised by how smart and innovative it was, because it was not like any other pattern I've made so far. I love that the designer made a video outlining the very first steps of making the bird. So if you're a beginner, it's super easy to have exactly what you're supposed to do laid out for you.
I think it was tricky the first couple of times that I made it, and I actually worked on some practice yarn because some of the yarns that are plush, I think this one is a yarn that's the big twist.
Yeah, the
posh yarn, and I find that this yarn's very easy to work with. If you make mistakes, it's easier to pull your work back out and it doesn't destroy the yarn. But there are other yarns that I've worked with that are really difficult to pull out your work. So when you're first practicing, you might want to use a yarn like this, or even just some acrylic yarn to get the hang of what it is that you're doing on that bird top.
And that way you have more stitch definition too, because being able to see your stitches when you're a new crocheter is really, it makes the process much more simple.
Yeah, and when your eyes get older like mine, I find I have to have a light over my surface. Just my lamp by my couch isn't really enough to see the definition of the top of the stitches, especially when you have to go into a front loop or a back loop. It's really hard to see where those stitches are with some of these plushier yarns.
As in all amigurumi patterns, this bird is worked in the round, and you do have to pay attention to the beginnings of your rows. I find it very helpful to have a stitch marker.
I find when you get to that stitch marker, if you go back and count your stitches, it's really helpful. I'm a little bit of a cheater, I have to say though. If I'm a stitch or two short, I'll add them in and change where the start of my row is. And you can get away with that in this pattern until you start the feathers for the wings. once you're there, you're kind of committed to where the front of your bird is.
Definitely. And it makes a difference when you add the feet later on too.
Right. You want your bird to look straight ahead, so the feathers are on the side and your feet are in the center, and then you know where to place your eyes and your beak. I made the pink flamingo first. This was the second bird I made. I was like, okay, I have to figure this pattern out before I do any color changing. And I just love this pink flamingo because it has that little white spot over the top of the beak. And I mean, it does. It looks like a pink flamingo. So
I hadn't made any of my flockers with the double colored noses yet until I made my little cute sparkly sparrow yesterday. And I thought that having the lighter color with the darker color beak would make it stand out a little bit more.
This is a thinner yarn too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a number 4, and I feel like this novelty yarn is almost a 4 too, so it makes it slightly bulkier, but like it was enough that when I took it out to make the bottom, because I didn't want the bottom to be sparkly, that I needed to double up the yarn on the bottom.
Okay. He's so adorable.
I love that one.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm gonna make more like that. The designer also has a video tutorial on creating the wings. This was another new technique for me, and the video was super helpful to figure out exactly what you needed to do to make them. After making the first bird, the wings were super easy.
I think the other thing that I found that I would change as I keep making some of these, this bird here, I crocheted this bird with 3 strands of acrylic weight yarn, and I used 3 strands to make the birds, and this is just kind of messy to me. I really don't love all 3 of the strands. I thought it would be super cool, but I mean, it's cute, but I would change that in the next ones. And then in this bird I did with double stranded yarn, and this was double, and I thought this turned out much cuter than this one. It just, to me, this is just overload on the wings. And then when you're doing these novelty yarns here, I think this turned out cute because the novelty yarns are hardly anything at all, and you just have these nice little loops.
They're just little puffs.
I think the original design on this pattern with this 6 loops on each side is really nice.
It's just the perfect little addition.
Right. I also like that it's dimensional, because when you crochet a wing and you sew it on, you know, it's not going to have this much of a dimension.
Right. It's not going to stick straight out typically.
Yeah. And even if you made a wing and you crocheted it in, it's not going to have this kind of effect. And I really like this. It complements the top feathers really well.
Yeah, and I really like that you don't have to add it on after you've made the bird either.
I agree.
The fact that it just goes in as you're making it makes it so much simpler.
Yeah. This is really fast and easy if you're making gifts for anyone, but especially if you're a crocheter and you're preparing for a market, this is a great pattern to make up really cute things quick. And I also think you're able to make these with yarns you already have in your stash.
Yeah, using the most unexpected yarns, in my opinion, has been one of my favorite things, especially since I can stash bust, because if you've seen any of my shorts, you know that I have a massive stash.
She does. She has a yarn shop.
You should go check out my shorts after this video if you haven't yet.
Yeah, and part of that is we grew up with my mother-in-law, who was a massive crocheter. And
she was a major market crocheter before it was cool to be a market crocheter.
Right, exactly. So we had a lot of training in that, and we found the most amazing places to go yarn haul.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's no longer in business anymore, but there is this amazing place in Rochelle, Illinois, Aunt Mary's Yarn.
Yeah.
And we would go there and literally, we would fill the car, the trunk, everything. Every seat you were sitting on, you were holding bags and garbage bags full of yarn. Yeah. We would go down there and we would fill the entire car with yarn. And I don't know. They were
mill ends. So some of the yarns you had to ball up because they had like laceration of heat in the middle of them.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit annoying, but once you got past that part, then they would just go on and on and on, which was nice. Or they would be like huge skeins that were misshapen as they were becoming skeins. So they were just weird and maybe had some barf. But my grandma was an amazing yarn baller before, and she didn't even have like a yarn cake maker.
No,
she would have like loved a yarn cake maker. Right, anything.
Yeah. And I think some of them were perfect, but they were also so much more discounted than buying them. And where we grew up was in the rural area of southern Wisconsin, and the only places to buy yarn when we were growing up was Walmart, basically whatever Walmart had. And so when we both started doing markets over 10 years ago, we were like, we're not crocheting with Walmart yarn.
No.
And we stepped it up to find some other nicers, and now it's like the world is your oyster.
Exactly. There's so many more options for yarn now, especially soft acrylics.
Yeah.
Soft and affordable.
I digress.
I mean, affordable could be subjective. But
Right. Okay. So that's another video. So all of these birds have 12 millimeter eyes. That's what the pattern recommends. And I think last night I created this bird, and I used a super bulky yarn. It's wool, and I used a 15 millimeter eyes. I think that the eyes are adorable on these. Obviously, you can add more embellishments to them if you want, or actually sew them on too. I don't imagine that this particular item would be a baby gift.
no.
So
Especially with the looped feathers.
I think something like this is more for older children, and that
Or a decor item.
right for your car or your office.
Something to make you smile.
Exactly. And a fidget toy too for
Right.
some, kids.
Right, because it would be really nice to just, I know my daughter would love to just play with it.
Right.
And squish it.
Exactly.
And maybe mess with the feathers a bit. Regarding eyes, I just got an order from AliExpress with brand new glitter and holographic eyes yesterday. And I'm so excited to get to working with those. I am going to need to get a tool because I didn't realize how hard the plastic washers are. That's going to be something that I have to invest in, but I can't wait to start working with them because they are really, really, really pretty. They are totally
so pretty.
a step up in the making of amigurumi eyes.
Right. And honestly, we've bought almost all of our eyes up to date at Hobby Lobby because they have the best price.
Oh, they're so cheap. It's $1.79 for 10 pairs of eyes, I think.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the size. But they're so much more expensive other places. And then when you get to the larger eyes, like 18 millimeter, 20 millimeter and above, you only get one pair of eyes. And
For
it's like
$2.79.
Right. It's so expensive. So finding other places to purchase those types of items will help keep the cost of your item down.
And if you buy enough on AliExpress, typically, I mean, it depends on the seller, you can get them really cheap. The biggest eyes that I got are 43 cents a pair, and those are 25 millimeter eyes. So way, 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 way cheaper
And
than
are
buying
those
them.
glitter eyes?
Yeah, and they're glitter
Yeah.
and holographic. So
Yeah.
very cool.
So let's talk about the feet. Quite honestly, when I get down to the bottom and putting the feet in, I stop counting because I'm going for where's it going to look even between the wings, right? And I'm sure that the pattern is correct. It's maker error.
I've always done it by the pattern, and I think I'm
works
holding
out?
her birds, but
Okay.
my birds, I would say, typically work out, and then I just put the eyes in to accent the foot location.
This one's probably more accurate to the pattern. The placement's wider. This one, I put the legs close together. That's just where I thought that they should go. So
And it's really cute.
yeah, I think that's the thing with crochet that I love is it's like cooking. I rarely follow a recipe. If somebody asks me, oh, can I get the recipe for this? I'm like, I just made it with the ingredients I have on hand. And that's kind of how I crochet too. I crochet with things that I love and want to make it look the way I have it in my mind, and sometimes that means not exactly following the pattern. So you'll probably notice that not all of our birds look
exactly
the same, right? Because these feet are placed wider than these feet. Sometimes I do try to follow patterns, but again, this one is a much closer foot placement than the pattern.
I wouldn't have noticed if she hadn't told me. So,
yeah. But that's just how I roll with things.
Yep.
So there's some extra finishing touches that you can do to these birds, and one of the first birds I made with it's not a novelty yarn, but it was wool, and I have a lot of wool in my stash from a marketplace haul that we had off of Facebook Marketplace, and it was tons and tons of wool. I think I used the same hook size, but I crocheted looser. I added the embellishment of taking my blue yarn back in, making some V's over the breast. It just looked too stark, like the contrast between the blue and the cream was like, it didn't look natural to me, and I just thought, this little guy just looks so much more alive.
He's very cottagecore.
Yeah, and that's why I think, just because a designer creates a pattern made for plushies doesn't obligate you to only use plushies.
That dog's breaking down the door. Hi,
guys.
Come on in. Hi. Hi. Hello. I love you too. I love you too. Xander.
One of the other things I wanted to mention is using the same technique that the designer has for the wings. When you've put the feet on, I think it would be super adorable on that back row to actually add a few tail feathers. And even if you made the same tail feathers, but you put them all in one stitch, so that they all just kind of pop out in one area. You could do it either on the row you do the feet, or even maybe a row above, and that would be super cute too. All right. Excuse us.
Pets have infiltrated. The size of your bird is going to be dependent on the yarn and the hook combinations you use.
Right.
So this is exactly the same pattern, but you can see the difference between making with Bernat blanket and a strand of number 4 worsted plus this novelty yarn makes a very, very different bird.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I used a 7mm crochet hook when I created this bird, and I used a 5.5mm crochet hook when I made that bird.
Right. And all of the patterns that I've made up the birds, I've used the same size hook. This was made with a 5.5 size hook, and this was made with a 5.5 hook. And this was made with the 5.5 hook. So I actually wanted to see how the sizing would come out differently based on the same crochet hook, but the different yarns. And we haven't really talked about pricing on these, but it's the same number of stitches to crochet a tiny little bird versus a much larger plushie. And I guess my feeling is sometimes bigger is better in terms of your pricing, because people feel like they're getting more for their money if they can get something bigger than instead of tiny. But some of these tiny things are just more artistic, and you do have to be compensated for that also, because there's a certain amount of artistry that goes along with being inspired by the different yarns and then putting the different features on them and crafting them in special ways. In our next video, we're going to talk about 10 different ways that learning to crochet amigurumi has helped us learn to crochet better.